before religion, before civilization, before any empire rose or fell on this earth. Something else was already here, and they left a record, not in legend, not in stories passed by word of mouth across generations. They carved it, into clay, into stone, into the walls of temples that had no right to exist at the level of knowledge they reflect. Beginning in the 1840s, archaeologists began unearthing hundreds of thousands of clay tablets beneath the sands of modern-day Iraq, the ancient land of Mesopotamia. Scholars spent over a century translating them, and what they found shook the foundation of everything historians thought or they understood about where we came from. These tablets describe a group of beings the ancient Sumerians called the Anunnaki. They were not gods in the way we imagine gods. They had ranks, missions, disagreements, ambitions. They had a reason for being here, and that reason was us. Everything in this documentary comes directly from tablets that exist right now, in physical form, in some of the most prestigious museums on Earth. The British Museum in London, the Iraq Museum in Baghdad, the Oriental Institute in Chicago. These are not fringe claims. These are ancient texts. The question is not whether they exist. The question is, what do they actually say? Stay with this, because by the time we reach the end, you will not look at the book of Genesis, or the scientific story of human evolution. The same way again, to understand the Anunnaki, you first have to understand who recorded them. Around 3500 BCE, roughly 5,500 years ago, a civilization emerged in the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what is now Iraq. They are called the Sumerians, and by every measurable standard, they were the first advanced civilization on Earth. They invented writing, mathematics, astronomy, formal legal codes, irrigation, urban planning, the concept of the city itself. In the span of just a few centuries, they went from scattered settlements to a fully functioning, highly sophisticated society, and historians to this day still cannot fully explain how. This is sometimes called the Sumerian problem, the sudden, almost inexplicable leap in human capability, with no clear trail of gradual development leading up to it. But the Sumerians themselves were not confused by it at all. They had an answer. They said they did not figure it out on their own. They said the knowledge, writing, mathematics, agriculture, governance, was handed to them by the Anunnaki. The name itself is the first clue. In ancient Sumerian, Anunnaki translates roughly as those who from heaven came to earth. Not beings who lived in the sky and looked down, beings who came down. The distinction matters more than it might seem. And across more than 500,000 recovered clay tablets, the Sumerians describe these beings in extraordinary detail. Their leadership structure, their council of decision-makers, their internal conflicts, and the moment they chose to do something on this planet that would alter its course forever. Here is where the story becomes something you will not forget. According to the Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki did not travel to Earth out of exploration, or conquest, or spiritual mission. They came because their world was in crisis. Their home, referred to in the ancient texts as Nibiru, was suffering from severe atmospheric deterioration, and the solution the texts describe is this. Microscopic particles of gold, suspended in the upper atmosphere, could act as a reflective shield, protecting the planet from radiation and stabilizing the environment. A planetary life support system built from gold dust. Now, pause on that for a moment, because in 2025, atmospheric scientists have genuinely proposed using aerosol particles, including reflective metallic compounds, as a potential method for managing Earth's climate and protecting against solar radiation. This is real, current, peer-reviewed science, and a version of it appears in tablets carved 5,000 years ago. So the Anunnaki came to Earth because Earth had gold, vast, ancient gold deposits. particularly in southern Africa, and according to the texts, the Anunnaki extracted it themselves over an immense span of time. Researcher Zecharia Sitchin, who spent 30 years studying Sumerian cuneiform before publishing his findings in 1976, pointed to ancient mining sites in South Africa dating back over 100,000 years, sites that mainstream archaeology has never been able to fully explain, sites with no clear Bronze Age civilization nearby to account for them. The Sumerians, however, had an account, and it was about to get far more complicated. After what the texts suggest was an enormous passage of time, something changed among the Anunnaki. The lower-ranking members, those assigned to the physical labour of extraction, had been at it for what the tablets describe as thousands upon thousands of years, and they reached a breaking point. The Sumerian texts describe a moment of collective refusal. The workers set aside their tools. They surrounded the residence of Enlil, the chief commander of the Anunnaki on Earth. In the middle of the night, they demanded relief. What is remarkable about this passage is not just its content, it is its tone. It does not read like mythology. It reads like a record of an event, workers, a crisis, a demand for change, a council convened to determine a solution. And into that council stepped one of the most significant figures in all of Sumerian literature, Enki. Enki was the Anunnaki's master of science. Specifically, what the texts describe as the knowledge of life itself, of biology, of creation. His proposal to the council was extraordinary. There were already beings walking the earth, primitive hominids, early humans in the most basic sense. Enki proposed taking those beings and elevating them, combining Anunnaki biological material with that of the existing earth creatures, creating a hybrid worker, intelligent enough to follow complex instructions, capable enough to perform physical labour, but not so advanced as to threaten the Anunnaki themselves. The council approved it, and the experiment began. Before we go further, if this is the first time you've come across this history, you are going to want to know what comes next, because what the tablets say happened after the creation of this new species, the conflicts it caused, the way the Anunnaki responded, and what eventually led to one of the most famous events in all of human memory, is even harder to believe than what you've already heard. If you're watching this on YouTube, scroll down right now and leave a comment with just the word tablets. It helps this reach people who genuinely want to understand ancient history, and I read every single one. Now, let's continue. The Sumerian tablets describe the process of creating this new being in clinical, almost scientific language. Enki and a female Anunnaki referred to as Nin-Hur-Sag, described as the medical officer of their expedition, combined their biological material with that of the existing Earth hominids. The first successful specimen was called the Adamu. The parallels to the biblical Adam are not coincidental. Biblical scholars have long noted that the earliest books of the Hebrew scripture contain material that mirrors Sumerian texts almost line for line, texts that predate the Bible by at least 1,000 years. The creation of man from clay and divine breath in Genesis. The garden where the first humans were placed and given a purpose. The restriction placed on them, the knowledge they were told not to seek. The great flood that comes later and reshapes everything. All of these appear in Sumerian texts first, and in the Sumerian version, the details are not metaphorical. They are operational. The Adamu could not reproduce at first. The texts describe this as intentional. The Anunnaki needed to control the population of their new workforce. But over time, according to the tablets, Enki made a further modification. The new beings were given the ability to reproduce on their own. And it was this decision, this single change, that became the source of an enormous conflict between Enki and his brother, Enlil, because Enlil never wanted that. Enlil saw the growing human population not as a workforce, but as a threat. The tension between Enki and Enlil runs through almost every major Sumerian text. And once you see it everywhere. In the Bible, in Greek mythology, in Egyptian theology, in the stories of nearly every ancient culture on Earth. Two forces in opposition, one that nurtures humanity, one that fears it. Enlil was the authority figure, the commander, the enforcer of order, the one who maintained the boundary between the Anunnaki and their creation. Enki was the protector, the one who gave humans language, agriculture, the foundations of civilization, who consistently intervened on humanity's behalf when Enlil pushed for restraint. This conflict comes to its most dramatic point in the story of the Great Flood. The tablets describe a moment when the Anunnaki Council, led by Enlil, made a decision to allow a massive, global-scale catastrophic event to essentially reset the Earth's population. Humanity had grown too numerous, too loud, too ungovernable. The decision was made, and it was agreed that the humans would not be warned. But Enki disagreed. He found a way to pass a warning through a man named Zeusudra in the Sumerian texts, called Utnapishtim in the later Babylonian version. The instruction: build a vessel, gather your family, preserve the animals. The story of Noah and the Ark appears in the Bible roughly 500 years after this Sumerian account. The resemblance is not approximate. It is nearly word for word. The vessel, the waters, the birds sent out to find dry land, the resting on a mountain, the offering made afterward. The only meaningful difference is the number of gods involved. In the Bible, one god. In the Sumerian original, a council. The tablets are extraordinary on their own, but what makes the Anunnaki narrative genuinely difficult to set aside is the physical evidence that aligns with it in ways mainstream archaeology still has not resolved. First, the sudden appearance of civilization. The Sumerians emerged without a traceable developmental period. Other civilizations, Egypt, China, the Indus Valley, show gradual growth over centuries. The Sumerians appeared essentially already advanced. The Sumerian problem, as academics call it, remains open. Second, the ancient African mining sites. Archaeologist and historian Michael Tellinger spent years studying stone ruins and ancient mining infrastructure in South Africa. Some sites dated by independent researchers to well over 75,000 years ago. His findings align with what the Sumerian tablets describe as the original Anunnaki extraction territory. These sites exist. The debate is about who made them. Third, the genetic anomaly. Modern geneticists have noted something unusual in the human genome. A period of what appears to be sudden, accelerated genetic change in our lineage that does not follow the expected pattern of gradual evolution. Some geneticists have referred to it as an unexplained bottleneck event, combined with what looks like intentional modification. Mainstream science attributes it to environmental pressure. Others point to the Sumerian tablets and ask whether there's a simpler explanation. None of this is offered as absolute proof. What it is offered as is this: the Sumerians wrote it down thousands of years ago in extraordinary detail, and the physical world, when examined closely, keeps producing questions that align with what they wrote. That is not nothing. If the Anunnaki were here, if they shaped early civilization, guided the Sumerians, intervened in the Great Flood, then the most pressing question is the one everyone eventually asks. Where did they go? The tablets offer some answers, but they raise even more questions. According to the later Sumerian and Babylonian texts, the Anunnaki gradually withdrew from direct contact with humanity. The texts describe a series of events. A catastrophic conflict between factions of the Anunnaki themselves, involving what the tablets describe as powerful weapons capable of levelling entire cities, that left certain regions of the ancient world permanently uninhabitable. Some researchers point to the strange, sudden abandonment of cities in the Sumerian heartland around 2000 BCE. Cities simply left, their populations gone, as physical evidence of something large-scale happening. The tablets describe an evil wind, an invisible force that swept across the cities of Sumer, from the direction of a great confrontation to the west. Some researchers have proposed this as an account of a radiological event. Others hold it as metaphor for political collapse. What the texts agree on is this. After this point, the direct presence of the Anunnaki on Earth fades. The gods, as the Sumerians understood them, were gone, and what was left was us. Humanity, in the Sumerian worldview, was not an accident of evolution. It was a project, an intentional creation, one that its architects eventually chose to step away from, or were forced to. The texts are not clear on which. You can approach the Anunnaki story from many directions. You can view it as mythology, as the ancient human way of making sense of the universe through narrative and symbol. You can view it as history, as a literal record of events too extraordinary for later generations to accept as fact, and so gradually reclassified as legend. Or you can sit in the space in between, and simply ask the question the Sumerians themselves seem to have lived inside of, what if we are not the beginning of this story? What if the consciousness looking out through your eyes is the result of a process that started not in a garden, not in the slow churn of biological chance, but in a decision made by beings far older than any civilization we have record of, on a world we have never seen, for a reason that still shapes everything we are. The Sumerian tablets do not tell us what to believe. They simply say, we were told this, we wrote it down, we preserved it. 5,000 years later, the tablets still exist, and they are still waiting for someone to take them seriously. Perhaps that someone is watching this right now. The story of the Anunnaki does not end with their disappearance, because many of the ancient texts, including Sitchin's translations, describe a specific timeline, a return. Based on the orbital cycle of Nibiru that the tablets describe, some researchers have done the astronomical math, and the results are not as far away as you might expect. That is the subject of a future video in this series. But before we get there is something I need to cover first. In the next video, we go deep into the relationship between Enki and Enlil, the two brothers whose rivalry, according to the tablets, is the hidden engine beneath nearly every conflict in ancient history, and possibly ours. If you want to be here for that, subscribe. Right now. The button is right below this video. Turn on notifications so you don't miss it. And if this video opened something up for you, if it made you question something, made you curious, made you want to go read a Sumerian tablet yourself, share it with one person who you think is ready to ask a bigger question. The Anunnaki said humanity was not meant to have this knowledge. Enlil wanted it buried. Enki disagreed. Maybe that's why you're still here. The tablets were buried for thousands of years. They survived. Maybe some things are meant to be found. I'll see you in the next one.